Well, good morning, River Mountain Church. So glad to be with you, even though we're not technically here. We are in sunny Florida, at least I think it might be sunny. If all wind is planned, we're enjoying 85-degree temperatures and maybe even getting ready to go swimming. So I don't know why I told you that. I guess that was kind of mean-spirited. I shouldn't have said that. But that's not the big news. The big news is, as of Thursday, we signed a document that makes us the proud owners of a piece of land in Oneida, Pennsylvania. The 3 acres, actually 3.6 acres, is now technically in our possession, the promised land. And to be honest with you, I always felt excited about the fact that we were going to be on Chapel Road, and we changed the name to River Mountain Chapel, which, by the way, is an actual very biblical concept, because a church location or a church building is a chapel. A church isn't a building or a piece of land. The church is the ecclesia, or the called out ones. Another interesting side note, and since I've been exploring this whole idea of the church being in Oneida, I've been brushing up on my history of this area and the Native Americans. And I discovered in Union Township that the Native Americans, the Lenapes, that settled there in Shoshone, a place called the Meeting of Five Mountains, when they looked south, they saw 5 mountain ridges. And one of those mountain ridges they actually called, are you ready for this, River Mountain. I'm not making that up. You can see it right there, River Mountain. Knob Mountain was another one, but the Native Americans had the name before we did. But I think, again, that is sort of in keeping with the mission that I believe our church is on, which in a way is a national mission. Many people who have been here a long time know that I've said over and over again that the church has a local mission, but then there is a bigger mission, more of a national ministry. Now, that doesn't mean that, we're going to start pounding our chest saying we're national ministry or anything like that. It simply means that there's a mission that's national in nature. And what I feel that is, and this goes all the way back, I think, to the origins of us pioneering the work. I was riding through Jim Thorpe, and then coming up 93, and I was coming over the mountain, which eventually ends up in Beaver Meadows. But somewhere at the top of the mountain, just outside of Jim Thorpe, I began to get this heaviness, this sadness upon me. And it was so strong that I had to pull over. And I just remember weeping as I'm in the car. And I thought, this is so unusual, because I'm really very happy and very excited. I don't even know why this thing has happened to me. And so I began to ask the Lord and do a little research into this. And I found out that right outside of Jim Thorpe is where the walking purchase came to an end. And the walking purchase is one of the greatest tragedies in American history. And I'm not overstating that. In my opinion, it is the greatest tragedy in American history. The first humans to settle here in the Lehigh Valley were Palo-Americans, the Lenape Indians, or the people of origin. What's interesting about the Lenape Indians is they were divided into 3 categories. And in the northernmost part of the region, they were called Minsi, or the word actually translates people of the Stony Country. In 1682, William Penn and the Quaker colonists established Pennsylvania. And they did so by signing a treaty. William Penn, in this very historical painting under an oak tree, signed what was known as the Penn Treaty Park. He came as a Quaker, and the reason why he came to America, not only was there a grant given to him by the King of England, but as a Quaker, he believed that God had this special mission for the New World, especially for this place that was eventually known as Pennsylvania. Even if you go to Harrisburg, you will see in the rotunda much made about what is called the Holy Experiment. The Holy Experiment that William Penn, who was a Quaker, who was given to prophetic visions and dreams, that's what Quakers were known for, he believed that God had instructed him to come to Pennsylvania and set up this kingdom, this holy experiment, where all people could come together and live in peace, all nations. So in his mind, the Native Americans were a nation. And he wanted all the nations to sort of dwell together in peace, kind of a prophetic holy experiment, he called it. So when the Native Americans heard this, they were very excited to be a part of it. And so they linked arms, and for many years, both William Penn and the Quakers and the various different settlers lived in total peace and harmony. And it was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And that all came to an end when William Penn passed. And his sons began to take over. The treaty was in his name. And so they began to want to expand, especially Thomas Penn, along with James Logan, who was kind of a lawyer type, but was also a friend of William Penn. But they made this erroneous deal with the Lenape Indians for a parcel of land. And the agreement was, it was as much as they could walk in a day from Easton, Pennsylvania, into the woods, into Penn's woods. Indians had an idea of how much acreage that would be on a normal walk. And of course, we know the story that they hired these runners, and they cleared a path, and they took 3 to 4 times more land. And the Lenape Indians were absolutely shocked that this happened. And that was the beginning of the rift, because during the negotiations, James Logan continually referred to the godliness of William Penn and this holy experiment that the Indians totally trusted, and just assumed that the sons of William Penn would keep this same holy experiment going, and they didn't. It became a greed experiment. And from that day forward, everything changed in Pennsylvania and eventually in the nation. The Lenape Indians can no longer trust the settlers, can no longer trust William Penn, could no longer trust men of God, supposedly. Eventually, they were pushed from near Easton and Jersey, and they were pushed all the way out to the Susquehanna. Now, this is getting into our neck of the woods. The Lenape Indians were located closer to the shore, near the Delaware River, and now they're being pushed to the Susquehanna River. Some of the Indian towns that were established were Shamokin, which is now present-day Sunbury, also Nescopeck. These are some original Indian villages that are not very far from here. But what you need to know is when the Native Americans moved out near the Susquehanna, this deep wound was in place. And they began to think, how could they get their land back? How could they be cheated? How could they be so naive? How could they be so gullible? And it just began to fester. Imagine if somebody invaded America and took our land and took our property. We would eventually want to retaliate or somehow get it back, and that's what they were thinking. Along came a man by the name of David Brainerd, who again was inspired by the Holy Spirit to begin to reach these Indians. And David Brainerd knew about the walking purchase. He knew about the offense. So he actually traveled on horseback 300 miles to get out to the Susquehanna where these Indians were and try to make amends. Try to encourage them that this was not done in the name of God, that the kingdom of God was what they needed to enter into. And to everyone's shock, the Native Americans, even then, the Lenape Indians, begin to hear Brainerd, begin to listen to Brainerd, begin to think that maybe restoration could be possible, that maybe they could trust the white man. But soon afterwards, David Brainerd, some of the Quakers, began to petition the settlers, and especially our government, to no avail. And soon it became clear that they were not going to get their land back, nor would there be any restitution for this, nor would anything be made right. They soon began thinking about an attack, and the walking purchase took place in 1937. There was plenty of years gone by in which some restitution, some healing could have been made, and nothing was done. So in the first attack on a settlement in Carbon counties took place. What was deeply saddening about it is the massacre took place in many Moravian villages in Carbon County. The Moravians were pacifist. The Moravians did not put up a fight. The Moravians obviously were Christian people. And as word spread about this attack, everything began to change. There were two new treaties put into place called the Easton Treaties. The Easton Treaties took place in 1756 and 1758. And this pushed the rest of the Lenape tribes out of Pennsylvania completely. The settlements that were along the Susquehanna were abandoned, and now they were finally driven into Ohio. There was an intervention made, one last intervention, even in spite of this attack by the Lenape Indians. John Brainerd, who was the brother of David Brainerd, petitioned the government of New Jersey for a piece of property in which the Lenape Indians, who were of a different spirit, a different heart, had become Christians, that they could stay in New Jersey in their homeland. It was called Brotherton. This was the first Indian reservation, and it was established right after this particular raid in 1758. And here's where the story sort of ties together with the Lenape Indians and the Oneida Indians. Now, the Oneida Indians were just one nation among 6 nations of the Iroquois. And the Iroquois Indians lived, like I said, in upstate New York. What is interesting about the Oneida Indians, not only did they invite the Lenape to come and settle with them, but they had their own visions of what was right and what God wanted them to do. The God that they knew, the Great Spirit that they knew, wanted them to do. And so of all of the Native American tribes, at least 10 nations that were in this region of Pennsylvania and upstate New York, they were the only ones who got this revelation that the Americans, that the settlers, were on the right side of things. And so they decided that they would link arms with the Revolutionary Army, and they began to fight side by side with the Americans, even against Native Americans who were siding with the British. It was told over and over again in the 1700s. We have since lost that. One thing in particular that they did to help the Americans when the Revolutionary War took place at Valley Forge. We all remember images of George Washington at Valley Forge going out privately and kneeling and praying to God. And one of the things that George Washington did, I cannot be sure that it came out of his prayer time, but he began to reach out to the Oneida Indians, the Indians who had fought for the Americans in battles in New York State. And when word reached the Oneida Indians that George Washington was in need of their help, they traveled from upstate New York through Pennsylvania all the way down to Valley Forge. They also brought, I think, 300 bushels of corn to feed the army. And there was one woman, so Polly Cooper was this amazing woman who came down with the Oneida Indians, sort of this godly woman, and she was very instrumental in teaching and instructing. As a matter of fact, they have resurrected a plaque and a statue of her in many places where the American Revolutionary War is honored. In the spring of 2017, for the first time, Philadelphia opened up a brand new museum. You can go there if you like. I haven't been there yet, but I want to go, and it's the Museum of the Revolutionary War. And what they did is again, in trying to make some of these wrongs right, went back and studied the history of the Revolutionary War. And they singled out the Oneida Indians. As a matter of fact, they made a documentary about the Oneida Indians that I wanted to show you, but probably can't. I wasn't able to copyright that to be able to show it to you. Now, what I find fascinating about being in this area is studying what has gone on before us. And if you go to the website of the city of Hazleton, you will see the history of this land, how Moravians came here. And so they named this place Hazel Swamp, and then eventually, and by the way, swamp was just an open, fertile area. It wasn't a swampland. There's mention of the warrior path was the way that they got to this location. So I began to study the warrior path because it's a main artery. And what I found out is most likely they did not come to this area along the warrior path. I went back and pulled out some very ancient maps of this area and some of the Indian trails. And I also did some research from some other historians who have written very specific books about Pennsylvania and the Native Americans. And what I found out is that there was a path called the Nescopec Path. And this path was put into place by the Native American Indians to reach from Easton, Pennsylvania, down to Bethlehem, and then from Bethlehem all the way up to Nescopec, which is right across the Susquehanna River from Berwick today. If you go to Nescopec, you drive along 93 to get there. But that was the path that the Native Americans used to get into this area. And as you can see, it's not very far from where we are presently located. As a matter of fact, you see this little line here that stretches from the Catawissa Creek on down to about 80. And this is actually a waterway. Now, it looks like a pretty major waterway, and maybe it was at the time, but it isn't today. But as you can see, it is very close to what became the village of Oneida. And I've asked myself, why do these people call this place Oneida after the Indians of the Standing Stone? And there are two main reasons, I think. The Oneida Indians were up in upstate New York, but the Lenape Indians that were here in this area were also referred to as people of the stationary stone or people of the rock. And so it's very possible that the settlers wanted to use this name for the Lenape or maybe also the Oneida Indians, but the word meant people of the stone. But I think the main reason, and if you go to our property you will see this, that the standing stone on this property is very, very unique. We lived in this area about 12 years, and we've walked a lot of the rocky areas, and there is a lot of rock, but there's very few rock formations that are quite this pronounced. So my thought is that this piece of property, which is on the far south border of Oneida and would have been the entranceway into Oneida, the first street that was built by the settlers was actually 2nd Avenue, not 1st Avenue, but 2nd Avenue in Oneida. So this would have been the entrance point to the town of Oneida, and as you can see, it's a dramatic entrance. So one of the things we plan to do is honor that history when we come to this new facility. The other thing that we hope to do is be a part of healing an ancient womb. The prophet Jeremiah in Jeremiah 30 talked about the balm of Gilead that was to be healing for people that were outcast. In the book of Revelation, Revelation 22, talks about that the tree of life is to be, the leaves are to be healing for the nations. God still has a plan for nations. He still honors nations. And since that's the book of Revelation, and we know that all the nations of the world are gathered together before the throne, God is still in the nation-building business. As a matter of fact, the Great Commission is not to go into all the world and make converts of people. It is to go into all the world and make disciples of all nations. That's what the text actually says, disciples of all nations. So our challenge is, how do we get followers of all nations? And if this is an ancient wound that was perpetrated on these indigenous people of this land, the walking purchase of 1737, And then after that, just continual pushing them out of their land. And never any kinds of restitution. America does not even have a national holiday to recognize the Native American Indians. We don't even have a day that we set aside. The closest we have is what was put on the calendar a while back, the Indigenous People Day, which was also Columbus Day, which I'm not sure that's the way to go. That can stir up more division. There should be a particular day in which we can honor and respect the Native American people, the indigenous people, that we can somehow heal the wound. Thanks for listening to this message. At some point we'll show the video, but we can't do that today. So have a blessed Sunday. Enjoy the rest of the day. Pray for the property. Pray for our mission. Pray for the healing of all nations. God bless you.
I was born where the rivers run. Native blood runs through my veins. I was born where the eagles come, waiting till the winter fades. I was born in an endangered son. I was spared by a mother's dream. I was saved by the power of love. I was snatched from the fire of greed. Great river road where justice ruled. Let it roll down. Great river road where healing flowed. Let it flow now. Great river road where justice ruled. Let it flow now. Let it flow now. I was born to an orphan son. I was seed from a broken life. I was just like the other ones, waiting on the other side. Freedom won. Mother sent me down the stream. I was saved by the power of love. I was snatched from the fire of greed. Great river road where justice rolled. Let it roll down. Healing flow. Let it flow now. Red river road where justice rolls. Let it roll down. ancient eternal balm for ancient there's eternal balm for the ancient let it flow now deep, deep, let it flow go way beyond what we even know about. Let it flow.